The unexpected encounter. Jason's life was about routine. As a cargo hauler, his days were spent navigating star maps, haggling with traders, and sipping cheap synth coffee in dusty galactic ports. Gowron Station was no different. A bustling hub in the far reaches of the galaxy, it smelled of oil, spice, and the faint metallic tang of alien atmospheres. Jason had docked his ship, the Horizon's Edge, for some quick repairs and restocking. It was supposed to be a quiet day. But that changed when he saw her. She was seated in the shadowy corner of the station's open market, an area crowded with vendors hawking exotic wares. Jason's eyes were drawn to her almost immediately. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, tall and commanding, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed like molten gold. Her armor, though dulled by years of use, bore intricate patterns that hinted at battles long past. Jason wasn't the only one who noticed her. Whispers floated through the market like static. "That's her, Kalara," an alien trader muttered under his breath. "They call her the galaxy's most dangerous woman." Jason paused mid-step. Dangerous. He glanced at her again, this time noting the way others seemed to avoid her. Traders shifted their stalls farther away. Mercenaries who normally strutted around the station like kings gave her a wide berth. Yet she sat there, perfectly still, as if the chaos of the market didn't touch her. Then her eyes locked onto him. Jason felt a chill run down his spine. For a moment, he considered walking away, pretending he hadn't noticed her, but something about her gaze rooted him to the spot. It wasn't just that she was intimidating. It was the way she looked at him, as if she already knew him. Before he could decide whether to flee or approach, she rose from her seat and began walking toward him. Each step she took seemed to suck the air out of the market. Conversations quieted, and even the ever-present hum of machinery seemed to dim. Jason swallowed hard. When she finally stopped in front of him, she said only one thing. "You're the one I've been searching for." Jason blinked, his mind racing. "Me? I think you've got the wrong guy." Her lips curled into a small, humorless smile. "I never make mistakes." Jason glanced around nervously. People were staring now, though most tried to pretend they weren't. The last thing he wanted was attention, especially from someone like her. "Look, I'm just a cargo hauler. I don't even know who you are." "You will," she said simply, "but not here." Before Jason could argue, she grabbed his wrist, not hard, but firm enough to make it clear she wasn't asking. "Your ship. Now." "Wait a second." Jason protested, trying to pull back, but her grip was unyielding. He glanced at the nearby station guards, hoping one of them might step in, but they quickly averted their eyes. Cowards. Kalara leaned in close, her voice low. "If you value your life, you'll listen to me." Jason stared at her, searching for any sign of deception in her intense gaze. There was none. Against his better judgment, he nodded. "Fine. This way." He led her through the winding corridors of the station, his mind buzzing with questions. Who was she? Why was she looking for him? And most importantly, how was he going to get out of this? When they reached the Horizon's Edge, Jason hesitated at the entrance. "This is my ship," he said, trying to stall. "But I don't think." Kalara pushed past him, entering the vessel without waiting for an invitation. Jason sighed and followed her. Inside, she scanned the cramped space with a critical eye, her expression unreadable. "Nice place," she said, though her tone made it clear she didn't mean it. Jason crossed his arms. "Okay, you've got me here. Now tell me what this is about." Kalara turned to face him, her golden eyes blazing. "You're carrying something. Something that could change the fate of the galaxy. And you don't even know it." Jason frowned. "What are you talking about?" "All I've got is a shipment of processed minerals and some spare parts." She shook her head. "It's hidden. Somewhere in your cargo. An artifact of immense power." Jason laughed, though it came out more nervous than amused. "Right. Sure. And I suppose you're here to save the galaxy with it." Her expression darkened. I'm here to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." "And whose hands would those be?" Jason asked. As if in answer, a shrill alarm blared through the ship. Jason's heart sank. Someone was trying to breach the station's dock. His dock. Kalara drew a sleek, menacing weapon from her belt. "The kind of people you don't want to meet," she said grimly. Jason stared at her, his mouth dry. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was just a cargo hauler. He wasn't supposed to get involved in galaxy-shaking conflicts or deal with the most dangerous woman in the universe. But as the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the ship's hull, Jason realized he didn't have a choice. "Stay behind me," Kalara ordered. And for some reason, Jason obeyed. A secret weapon. Jason's ship, the Horizon's Edge, was no stranger to close calls, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. The warning sirens screamed, and the faint rumble of distant explosions echoed through the hull. Jason's heart raced as Kalara scanned the ship's cargo hold, her golden eyes sharp and unyielding. "Do you have defenses on this ship?" she asked, her tone brisk, almost impatient. Jason stammered, a basic shield generator, and maybe a turret or two, but—" "Activate them," she interrupted. "We're out of time." Jason ran to the cockpit, his hands fumbling over the controls. The display showed multiple ships closing in fast, sleek, angular vessels bristling with weapons. These weren't the usual scavengers or petty pirates. These were professional bounty hunters. "Who are these people?" Jason shouted over his shoulder. Kalara didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled a compact device from her belt and slammed it onto the wall. The device emitted a faint hum before projecting a shimmering barrier over the ship's cargo hold. "They're not here for you," she finally said. "They're here for me, and what you're carrying." Jason spun his chair around. "What I'm carrying? You keep saying that, but I don't even know what it is." Kalara strode to the center of the room, her armor gleaming under the dim lights. She placed a small holographic projector on the table, and a swirling image appeared. A jagged metallic object encased in what looked like a translucent crystal. "This," she said, her voice steady, "is the artifact. It's a remnant from the Erythian civilization, one of the galaxy's most advanced but long-extinct empires. It's not just a piece of history, it's a weapon." Jason stared at the image, confusion and fear mixing in his gut. "Why would I have something like that? I hauled minerals, not ancient weapons." Kalara fixed him with a piercing stare. "The artifact was hidden in a shipment routed through your company. An attempt to smuggle it past the wrong people. But something went wrong, and it ended up here. Now it's on your ship, and every bounty hunter, mercenary, and warlord in this sector is hunting for it." Jason rubbed his temples, trying to process the situation. "So let me get this straight. I'm an accidental smuggler of a galaxy-altering weapon, and now I'm being targeted by, what? Space assassins?" Kalara nodded. "More or less." "Fantastic," Jason muttered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Suddenly, the ship rocked violently, throwing Jason against the wall. Kalara remained steady, her reflexes inhumanly quick. The sound of blaster fire echoed from outside as the bounty hunters began their assault. Kalara pulled him to his feet. "We need to move. They'll breach the hull if we don't act fast." Jason followed her as she led him to the cargo bay. His heart sank at the sight of the chaos. Crates overturned, sparks flying from damaged panels, and the constant thud of impacts from enemy fire. Kalara wasted no time, moving with precision as she searched through the cargo. "What are you doing?" Jason yelled over the noise. "Finding the artifact," she replied. "We can't let it fall into their hands." Jason hesitated before joining her. Together, they tore through crates of minerals and spare parts, searching for anything that matched the image Kalara had shown him. The ship groaned under the strain of the assault, and Jason could feel time slipping away. Finally, Kalara froze, her eyes locking onto a small, unmarked crate. She pried it open, revealing a strange, glowing object nestled inside. It was smaller than Jason had expected, barely the size of a loaf of bread, but it pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly energy. "That's it," Kalara said, her voice almost reverent. Jason stared at the artifact, his instincts screaming at him to stay far away. "What does it do?" Kalara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she carefully lifted the artifact, cradling it as if it were something fragile and dangerous all at once. "It has the power to disrupt matter at a molecular level. In the wrong hands, it could destroy entire planets." Jason took a step back. "And in the right hands?" Kalara's expression softened, just slightly. "In the right hands, it could save them." Before Jason could respond, the ship shook violently again, and a deafening crash signaled that the bounty hunters had breached the hull. The sound of heavy boots echoed through the corridors. Kalara turned to Jason, her eyes blazing with determination. "We can't let them take it. You're with me now, whether you like it or not." Jason opened his mouth to protest, but the words caught in his throat as Kalara drew her weapon and moved toward the sound of approaching enemies. Against every instinct telling him to run, Jason found himself following her. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just a cargo hauler. He was in the middle of something much bigger and far more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. The escape. The dim glow of emergency lights bathed the corridors of the horizon's edge in flickering red. Jason's ship, once a safe haven among the stars, now felt like a death trap. The pounding of heavy boots echoed through the metal walls, each step drawing closer. "Stay low and follow me," Kalara commanded, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. Jason swallowed hard, clutching the small blaster she had handed him. He had never fired a weapon before, but the way Kalara moved, swift, calculated, and unyielding, gave him a strange sense of confidence. Still, the weight of the artifact they now carried filled the air with tension. It pulsed faintly, its strange glow illuminating Kalara's determined face as they crept through the narrow passages. "Do they know we have the artifact?" Jason whispered. Kalara glanced back, her golden eyes sharp. "Not yet, but it won't take them long to figure out where we're headed. We need to get to the cockpit and jump to hyperspace." Jason nodded, though every instinct in his body screamed for him to abandon ship and run. As they rounded a corner, a sudden blast shook the floor beneath them, and Jason stumbled. The bounty hunters were no longer taking subtlety into account. They were tearing his ship apart. Kalara yanked him upright. "Keep moving. They're trying to corner us." "But this is my ship," Jason snapped, his frustration boiling over. "How am I supposed to fix it if we survive this?" Kalara's expression softened for a split second, a rare glimpse of humanity breaking through her stoic exterior. "You can't fix a ship if you're dead. Stay alive first, then complain." Before Jason could reply, a loud crash echoed from the direction they had come. They both turned in time to see a group of armored figures emerging from the smoke-filled corridor. The bounty hunters wore sleek black suits, their faces obscured by visors that glinted in the emergency lights. Kalara didn't hesitate. She raised her plasma rifle, her movements fluid and precise, and unleashed a barrage of energy bolts. The first hunter fell instantly, his armor sparking as he crumpled to the ground. The others took cover, returning fire with deafening blasts that ricocheted off the walls. Jason pressed himself against the wall, his heart pounding as he fumbled with his blaster. "What do I do?" he shouted over the noise. "Don't shoot me, for starters," Kalara barked, ducking behind a crate. "Aim for their weapons if you can't hit anything else. Just keep them distracted." Jason took a shaky breath and leaned out of cover. His first shot missed by a mile, but the second hit a hunter's rifle, sending it clattering to the floor. A rush of adrenaline coursed through him, and he fired again, this time grazing another attacker's shoulder. "Not bad," Kalara muttered, her tone grudgingly impressed. The firefight intensified, and Kalara began to push forward, her movements almost supernatural in their precision. Jason followed, sticking close as they advanced toward the cockpit. Each step felt like a lifetime, the sound of blaster fire drowning out everything else. When they finally reached the cockpit, Jason slammed the door shut behind them and locked it. Kaylara immediately moved to the control panel, her fingers flying over the console as she activated the ship's engines. "Can we even jump to hyperspace with them on board?" Jason asked, panting. Kaylara didn't look up. "If I do it right, the jump will create enough energy to destabilize their breach. They won't survive." Jason's stomach churned at the thought, but he knew she was right. Survival meant making hard choices, and these hunters had already made theirs. "Strap in," Kaylara ordered as the engines roared to life. "This is going to be rough." Jason barely had time to secure himself before the ship lurched forward. The bounty hunters' ships outside the dock scrambled to block their escape, but Kaylara's skill as a pilot was unmatched. The horizon's edge weaved through the blockade, narrowly avoiding incoming fire. Jason's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white. As the ship cleared the dock, Kaylara activated the hyperspace drive. The stars outside stretched into long streaks of light, and a deafening boom signaled their leap into hyperspace. Jason exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. The hum of the engines was the only sound, a stark contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. Jason looked at Kaylara, who was already scanning the controls for any signs of pursuit. "We made it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kaylara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "We're not safe yet. They'll follow us as soon as they figure out where we jumped to." Jason slumped back in his seat, exhaustion washing over him. "Why me?" he muttered. "I didn't ask for any of this." Kaylara leaned against the console, her golden eyes meeting his. "Because sometimes the galaxy doesn't care what you ask for. It chooses you anyway." Jason stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. He had always thought of himself as just another face in the crowd, a nobody trying to get by. But now, with the artifact in their possession, and the most dangerous people in the galaxy hunting them, he realized his life would never be the same. Kaylara straightened, her voice firm. "Rest while you can. We'll need to plan our next move." Jason nodded reluctantly, his mind spinning with questions. What was the artifact's true purpose? Why had it been hidden on his ship? And most importantly, could he trust Kaylara? As the ship hurtled through hyperspace, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that their escape was only the beginning. The galaxy's truth. The glow of hyperspace streaked through the cockpit windows like a silent river of light, casting a strange serenity over the chaos that had consumed Jason's world. For a moment, the silence was comforting, but Jason's mind refused to rest. Questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. Kaylara stood near the ship's console, her sharp gaze fixed on the holographic display. The artifact, now secured in a reinforced container, pulsed faintly in the corner like a living heart. Jason broke the silence. "You owe me an explanation." Kaylara didn't look at him, her fingers tapping commands into the console. "I've already told you what you need to know." Jason's frustration boiled over. "No, you haven't. You've dragged me into this mess, nearly gotten me killed, and now I'm the galaxy's most wanted. I think I deserve a little clarity." Kaylara paused, her shoulders tensing. For a moment, Jason thought she might brush him off again. But then she turned to face him. Her golden eyes, so fierce in battle, now held something deeper, regret, or perhaps something even closer to fear. "You're right," she admitted, her voice quieter than before. "You deserve the truth." Jason folded his arms, his heart pounding. He hadn't expected her to agree so easily. "So, start talking. What's the deal with this artifact? And why do I feel like you're not telling me everything?" Kaylara sighed and activated the holographic projector. The image of the artifact appeared again, spinning slowly in the air. Its crystalline structure refracted light in mesmerizing patterns, but Jason could feel the weight of its power, even in a projection. "This artifact," Kalura began, is called the Erythian core. It's a remnant of a civilization that disappeared over 1,000 years ago. The Erythians were different, advanced beyond anything we've ever seen. They didn't just build machines. They created technology that could manipulate the fabric of existence itself. Jason frowned. Fabric of existence. What does that even mean? Kalura gestured to the projection. The core is capable of altering matter on a molecular level. It can destroy planets, yes, but it can also restore them, heal them. It's a weapon, a tool, and a miracle, all in one. That's why it's so dangerous. Jason leaned back against the wall, his mind racing. And you're telling me it just ended up on my ship? By accident. Kalura's jaw tightened. Not by accident. Someone smuggled it onto your ship, knowing it would be overlooked as just another cargo delivery. But now that the syndicate knows it's here, they'll stop at nothing to take it. Jason felt a chill at the mention of the syndicate. The name carried weight, even in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. They were more than criminals. They were power brokers, manipulators, and destroyers. If they wanted the core, it couldn't mean anything good. Why don't we just destroy it? Jason asked. If it's so dangerous, why not get rid of it? Kalura shook her head. If it were that simple, the Erythians would have destroyed it themselves. The core is indestructible. The only way to neutralize it is to lock it in an energy field strong enough to suppress its power. Jason raised an eyebrow. And let me guess, that field doesn't exist anymore. Kalura nodded grimly. Not in this part of the galaxy. Jason ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. So, what's your plan? Run from bounty hunters for the rest of our lives? Kalura's eyes narrowed. My plan is to get the core to a safe place. There's a facility on the edge of the Dultar Nebula. An old Erythian site. If we can activate it, we can contain the core and keep it out of the Syndicate's hands. Jason frowned. And what happens if we fail? Kalura's expression hardened. Then the Syndicate gets their hands on the most powerful weapon in the galaxy, and no one will be able to stop them. The gravity of her words hit Jason like a punch to the gut. He had spent his life trying to stay out of trouble, to avoid the conflicts and dangers that came with living in a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos. But now he was in the middle of it, with no way out. He looked at Kalura, trying to read the emotions behind her stoic mask. Why are you doing this? You're risking your life for something that doesn't seem to benefit you at all. Kalura hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. When she spoke, her voice was softer than he'd ever heard it. Because I've spent my life being a weapon, used, discarded, and feared. This is my chance to be something more. To make a difference. Jason stared at her, caught off guard by her honesty. For the first time, he saw her not as the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, but as someone burdened by the same fears and doubts that haunted him. Before he could respond, the ship's alarms blared again, jolting them both back to reality. Kalura rushed to the console, her fingers flying over the controls. They've tracked us, she said, her voice sharp. We've got incoming ships. Jason's heart sank. Already? How did they? Kalura cut him off. It doesn't matter. Strap in. We're about to find out just how much this ship can handle. As the ship dropped out of hyperspace, Jason caught a glimpse of the pursuing vessels on the monitor. Sleek, black, and bristling with weapons, they bore the unmistakable insignia of the Syndicate. Kalura's voice was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. They want the core. They'll have to get through me first. Jason clenched his fists, feeling a strange surge of determination. He wasn't a fighter, a hero, or anything close to it, but for the first time, he realized he had no choice but to fight. The escape was over. Now, it was time to stand and face what was coming. Betrayal in the void. The ship jolted violently as Syndicate vessels closed in, their weapons lighting up the void of space. Explosions rattled the hull of the horizon's edge, and Jason clung to his seat, heart pounding as he watched the tactical display on the cockpit screen. Kalara stood at the helm, her hands steady on the controls, guiding the ship with surgical precision through the chaos. "Shields at 40%, Jason shouted, trying to make sense of the flashing redouts. "I don't think we can take much more of this." Kalara didn't flinch, her voice calm and focused. "We don't need to. Just hold on. We're almost clear." Jason swallowed hard and braced himself as another barrage rocked the ship. He glanced at the holographic display of the pursuing ships. There were 3 of them, moving in perfect formation, cutting off every escape route Kalara tried to create. "They're boxing us in," Jason said, his voice rising in panic. "We're running out of options." Kalara's golden eyes narrowed. "Not yet." Before Jason could ask what she meant, she slammed a series of buttons on the console. The ship lurched to the side, narrowly avoiding a missile that would have torn it apart. Then, with a deafening roar, the Horizon's edge dived toward a dense asteroid field. "An asteroid field? Are you insane?" Jason shouted, gripping his seat as the ship weaved through the massive rocks. "It's our only chance," Kalara replied. "Their ships are too large to follow us closely. If we're lucky, they'll lose sight of us." Jason wasn't sure if he believed in luck anymore, but he didn't have time to argue. The ship dipped and swerved, dodging massive chunks of rock that could crush them in an instant. Behind them, the Syndicate ships hesitated at the edge of the field, their weapons firing blindly into the debris. Kalara allowed herself a small smirk. "They're hesitating. Good." Jason let out a shaky breath. "Great. Now what?" Kalara turned to him, her expression serious. "Now we find out if you're as resourceful as I think you are." Jason blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Kalara reached into her armor and pulled out a small device, tossing it to him. Jason barely caught it, fumbling with the unfamiliar object. "That's a data spike," she explained. "It'll give us access to their comm systems, but someone has to physically attach it to one of their ships." Jason stared at her in disbelief. "You're kidding, right? How am I supposed to get close to one of their ships without, dying?" Kalara's smirk returned. "That's where I come in. I'll create a distraction and draw their fire. You'll take the EVA pod and get close enough to plant the spike." Jason shook his head, the absurdity of the plan sinking in. "This is insane. You're insane." Kalara leaned closer, her golden eyes boring into his. "You wanted to know why I chose you. This is why. You're not just some cargo hauler. You're adaptable, clever, and whether you realize it or not, brave." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but her words struck a chord. Deep down, he knew she was right. He didn't feel brave, but he also didn't feel like the same man who had stepped off the docks of Galran Station just hours ago. "Fine," he said, his voice steadying. "Let's do this." Kalara nodded, a rare flicker of approval crossing her face. "Good. Suit up. We don't have much time." Moments later, Jason found himself crammed into the EVA pod, his hands trembling as he gripped the controls. The pod was a small one-man craft designed for short-range repairs, not daring infiltration missions. Outside the viewport, the asteroid field loomed, its jagged rocks illuminated by the occasional flash of weapons fire. "Remember," Kalara's voice crackled through the comms, "stick to the shadows and move fast. They won't expect this, but if they spot you, they won't hesitate to shoot." "Comforting," Jason muttered, his breath fogging the visor of his helmet. The pod's engines hummed softly as he launched into the void, weaving through the asteroids toward the nearest Syndicate ship. His hands were slick with sweat, but he forced himself to focus, guiding the pod with careful precision. Kalara's distraction was immediate and explosive. The Horizon's edge burst from the asteroid field, its weapons blazing as it charged directly at the Syndicate ships. Jason watched in awe as Kalara's maneuvers defied logic, her ship dancing through enemy fire like a leaf in the wind. "They're focused on me," Kalara said, her voice strained but determined. "You're clear to approach." Jason's heart pounded as he neared the Syndicate ship. It loomed ahead like a predator, its sleek black hull bristling with weapons. He guided the pod toward a maintenance hatch on its underside, hoping the ship's sensors wouldn't detect him. "Almost there," he whispered to himself, his hand shaking as he activated the pod's magnetic clamps. The pod latched onto the hull with a metallic thud, and Jason grabbed the data spike. "I'm in position," he said, his voice trembling. "Now what?" "Plant the spike and get out," Kaylura replied. "I'll take care of the rest." Jason forced himself to move, his body protesting every step as he exited the pod and clung to the ship's hull. The stars spun around him, and he fought the dizzying sensation of weightlessness. A hatch loomed ahead, and he quickly inserted the spike into the access port. "Spike's in," he said, his voice tight. "Now what?" Kaylura's voice was laced with urgency. "Get back to the pod. Now." Jason didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled back to the pod, his movements frantic as the Syndicate ship's lights began to flash. They knew he was there. As he sealed himself inside and disengaged the clamps, the ship's alarms blared. Jason fired the pod's engines, speeding away from the Syndicate vessel just as its weapons turned toward him. "Kaylura," he shouted. "They've spotted me." "I see you," she replied, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Hold on." A blinding flash lit up the void as the horizon's edge unleashed a barrage of missiles, tearing through the Syndicate ship's shields and forcing it to retreat. Jason's pod raced toward the asteroid field, where Kaylura maneuvered her ship into position to intercept him. As the pod docked with the horizon's edge, Jason collapsed into the seat, his body trembling with exhaustion and relief. Kaylura appeared moments later, her expression unreadable. "You did good," she said simply, helping him to his feet. Jason met her gaze, a flicker of pride breaking through his fear. "So did you." Kaylura smirked. "Let's see if we're still saying that when this is over." As the ship disappeared into hyperspace once more, Jason realized he was in far deeper than he'd ever imagined. And he wasn't turning back now. The unraveling plan. The silence of hyperspace was deceptive. To Jason, it felt like the calm before a storm, a brief reprieve before chaos erupted again. The holographic display in the ship's command center buzzed faintly, showing the galaxy's star lanes and their destination, the Deltar Nebula. The ancient Erythian facility Kaylura had mentioned lay somewhere in that swirling radioactive cloud of stellar gas. Jason sat slumped in a chair, his muscles aching from the ordeal on the Syndicate ship. The weight of the artifact, securely stowed in the containment unit, loomed over them like an invisible force. Across the room, Kaylura stood at the console, her golden eyes scanning the display with relentless focus. "So," Jason said, breaking the heavy silence, "we've got a death machine in the cargo hold, bounty hunters on our tail, and we're heading straight into a nebula where radiation could fry us alive. Am I missing anything?" Kaylura didn't look up. "The Syndicate won't wait for us to make the first move. They'll calculate where we're headed, and they'll follow. If we don't reach the facility and activate the containment field before they arrive, we're finished." Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Great. No pressure." Kaylura finally turned to face him, her expression softer than usual. "You did well back there, Jason. Most people wouldn't have survived what you just did." Jason let out a dry laugh. "Thanks, I think. But I still don't get it. Why me? Why drag some nobody cargo hauler into all this when you could have picked literally anyone else?" Kaylura hesitated, her gaze dropping for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was quieter, almost vulnerable. "You're not a nobody, Jason. I've been watching you for a while." Jason's stomach twisted. "Watching me? That's unsettling. Care to explain?" Kaylura leaned against the console, crossing her arms. "Your ship's route intersects with some of the most volatile regions of the galaxy. You've dealt with pirates, smugglers, and corrupt officials, and yet you've always managed to stay alive. More than that, you've helped people, given them food, supplies, protection, without asking for anything in return. That's rare. Jason blinked, caught off guard. You've been spying on me. Kalara smirked faintly. Spying is a strong word. Let's just say I've been keeping an eye on potential allies. Jason shook his head, still trying to process her words. So, what? You think I'm some kind of hero? Kalara's expression hardened. No, heroes don't survive in this galaxy. But people like you, resourceful, loyal, and willing to take risks. Those are the ones who make a difference. Before Jason could respond, the ship's alarms blared, pulling them both back to the present. Kalara spun toward the console, her fingers flying over the controls. They found us, she said, her voice sharp. Jason's stomach sank as he looked at the display. A syndicate fleet had emerged from hyperspace, their ships spreading out to block every possible escape route. The largest vessel, a massive, heavily armed dreadnought, positioned itself at the center, its weapons trained on the horizon's edge. Let me guess, Jason said. That's their flagship. Kalara nodded grimly. The Oblivion. If they brought that, they're not planning to let us leave alive. Jason felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. What's the plan? Because I'm fresh out of ideas. Kalara turned to him, her golden eyes blazing with determination. The facility. It's our only chance. If we can activate the containment field and trap the core, the syndicate won't have a reason to chase us. Jason frowned. And if we can't? Kalara's jaw tightened. Then we'll destroy the facility, and ourselves, before we let the syndicate take the core. Jason's breath caught in his throat. He wanted to argue, to tell her there had to be another way. But the look in her eyes told him she wasn't bluffing. This was her mission, her redemption, and she was willing to sacrifice everything to see it through. Fine, he said, his voice shaking. Let's do it. Kalara nodded and activated the ship's engines. The horizon's edge surged forward, heading straight for the Deltar Nebula. Behind them, the syndicate fleet opened fire, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly precision. The ship's shields flickered under the assault, and Jason gripped his seat as the vessel shook violently. Shields at 30%, he shouted. We're not gonna make it. Kalara's hands moved with surgical precision on the controls, weaving the ship through the incoming fire. We'll make it, she said, her voice steady. Just hold on. As the ship entered the nebula, the view outside changed dramatically. Swirling clouds of gas and radiation surrounded them, casting eerie shadows across the cockpit. The syndicate ships hesitated at the edge of the nebula, their sensors struggling to penetrate the dense interference. They're holding back, Jason said, hope flickering in his chest. Kalara shook her head. They're not fools. They'll send in drones to scout the area before following us. Jason watched as several smaller syndicate drones entered the nebula, their sleek forms darting through the gas clouds like predators. Kalara adjusted the ship's course, using the nebula's interference to stay hidden. We're close, she said, her voice tight with focus. The facility should be just ahead. Jason glanced at the display, his heart racing as a massive structure appeared on the screen. The Erythian facility was a towering construct of dark metal and glowing blue veins, its design unlike anything Jason had ever seen. That's it? He asked, awe and fear mingling in his voice. Kalara nodded. That's it. If we can activate the containment field, the core will be neutralized. Jason's fingers clenched the armrests of his chair. And if we can't? Kalara didn't answer, but the look in her eyes said it all. As the horizon's edge approached the facility, Jason realized this was their last chance. Everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, came down to this moment. He didn't know if they would survive, but for the first time, he felt ready to fight for something bigger than himself. A dangerous alliance. The Horizon's Edge docked with the ancient Erythian facility, its massive entry gates groaning open like the jaws of a sleeping beast. Jason's breath fogged up his helmet as he stepped out into the cavernous interior, the atmosphere cold and filled with an eerie hum. The facility's architecture was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Towering spires, intricate carvings glowing with faint blue energy, and a sense of ancient power that made his skin crawl. Kalara moved ahead, her golden eyes scanning their surroundings with practiced precision. The artifact pulsed faintly in her arms, its glow intensifying the closer they got to the facility's central chamber. "This place feels alive," Jason muttered, his voice trembling despite the protective comlink in his suit. "It is," Kalara replied without looking back. Erythian technology wasn't just advanced, it was symbiotic. Their machines responded to emotions, intentions. That's why only a few can activate them. Jason frowned, following her into the main corridor. "And I'm guessing you're one of those few." Kalara hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes. And so are you." Jason stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. "What? Me? How is that even possible?" Kalara turned to face him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. "The core reacts to specific genetic markers. The Erythians encoded their technology to respond to descendants of those they trusted. Somehow, you're connected to their legacy." Jason opened his mouth to argue, but the words caught in his throat. His entire life, he had felt ordinary, just another face in the crowd. But now, standing in this ancient facility with the fate of the galaxy in his hands, he began to wonder if he'd been wrong. "Let's keep moving," Kalara said, breaking the silence. "The Syndicate won't wait for us to figure this out." They continued through the facility, the path illuminated by glowing veins of energy that seemed to guide their way. The hum of the structure grew louder, resonating in Jason's chest like a heartbeat. Finally, they entered the central chamber, a vast, circular room dominated by a massive, glowing sphere suspended in midair. Kalara set the artifact down on a pedestal near the sphere. "This is it, the core's containment field. Once we activate it, the Syndicate will have no way to use the artifact." Jason looked around nervously. "And how exactly do we activate it?" Kalara gestured to the glowing sphere. "Place your hand on it. The facility will do the rest." Jason hesitated, his palm hovering over the sphere. "What if it doesn't work? What if I'm not whatever you think I am?" Kalara stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "It will work. You have to trust yourself." Jason took a deep breath and placed his hand on the sphere. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy shot through him, and the chamber lit up with blinding blue light. The artifact on the pedestal began to hum, its glow intensifying as the containment field activated. "It's working," Kalara said, a rare note of relief in her voice. But before they could celebrate, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the chamber. Jason spun around to see a squad of Syndicate soldiers filing in, their weapons trained on him and Kalara. At the center of the group was a tall, imposing figure in dark armor, the Syndicate's commander. "Well, isn't this touching?" the commander said, his voice dripping with mockery. "The galaxy's most dangerous woman and her new pet human. I must admit, Kalara, you've surprised me." Kalara stepped in front of Jason, her plasma rifle raised. "You're too late. The core is already contained." The commander chuckled, his armored fingers tapping a menacing rhythm against his weapon. "Do you really think that will stop us? Destroying the core is only part of the plan. We're here for you." Jason's stomach twisted as the soldiers closed in. "What does he mean, here for you?" Kalara's jaw tightened. "The Syndicate didn't just create me. They perfected me. I was engineered to be the ultimate weapon, but I escaped before they could use me. Now they want me back." Jason felt a surge of anger. "She's not a weapon. She's a person." The commander smirked. "You've grown attached, haven't you? How quaint. But let's make this simple. Surrender her, and you can leave with your life." Jason glanced at Kaylara, whose grip on her rifle tightened. She didn't say a word, but her eyes spoke volumes. She was ready to fight, even if it meant sacrificing herself. "No deal," Jason said, stepping forward. "You're not taking her." The commander's smirk vanished. So be it. The chamber erupted into chaos as Kaylara fired the first shot, taking down 2 soldiers before the rest returned fire. Jason dove for cover, adrenaline pumping as blaster bolts lit up the room. The containment field flickered dangerously, and he realized they couldn't afford a prolonged fight. "Kaylara," he shouted over the noise. "The field. What happens if it collapses?" "It won't." She yelled back, her movements precise as she neutralized another soldier. "Just keep them off me." Jason grabbed a blaster from a fallen soldier and fired wildly, his shots forcing the syndicate troops to take cover. Kaylara moved like a storm, her precision and speed overwhelming their attackers. But the commander was relentless, closing the distance with terrifying efficiency. Jason saw the commander raise his weapon, aiming directly at Kaylara. Without thinking, Jason lunged forward, tackling the man to the ground. They grappled, Jason's strength no match for the commander's enhanced armor. But as the man raised a knife, Jason spotted the data spike still attached to his belt. Thinking fast, Jason ripped the spike free and jammed it into the commander's armor. The man froze, his systems short-circuiting as sparks erupted from his suit. Jason scrambled away, breathing hard as the commander collapsed. Kaylara finished off the last soldier and rushed to Jason's side. "Are you hurt?" Jason shook his head, his chest heaving. "I'm fine. What about the field?" Kaylara turned to the containment sphere, which pulsed steadily. "It's stable. We did it." Jason let out a shaky laugh, the weight of their victory sinking in. But as he looked at Kaylara, he saw the exhaustion in her eyes and the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "You're not bad for a cargo hauler," she said, helping him to his feet. Jason smirked. "And you're not bad for the galaxy's most dangerous woman." As they prepared to leave the facility, Jason realized something had changed. He wasn't the same person who had stumbled into this mess, and neither was Kaylara. Together, they had faced the impossible and come out stronger. The galaxy was still dangerous, but for the first time, Jason felt like he was ready for whatever came next.